Hello and welcome to another study in the book of Genesis. Today we will be looking at the last three chapters of the book of Genesis, chapters 48, 49, and 50 in our study today. The title of our lesson is Promises for the Future. It is dated February 28th of 2021. It is lesson number 13 in your quarterly if you do have one. And once again, if you do not, don't fret, I'll lead you right through this, but it is on page 89 if you'd like to follow along with the different parts there. The parts in our lesson today kind of jump around, so we're basically just going to try to cover all three chapters in our short 30-minute study that we have today. So just hang on tight, and we'll see once again where Holy Spirit leads us in our lesson today. Now, our application for today's lesson, what we can glean from this, if you will, is that the student will comprehend the importance of acceptance and forgiveness and forgive others as Christ has forgiven us. We're going to find out at the end here that Joseph truly forgives his brothers for what they had done to him. He had already forgiven them, but then we're going to see him forgive them once again. A lot of things are going to be happening in these three chapters. So with that being said, let's get started. Now, Genesis, we'll have a little bit of a recap here, if you will. Genesis covers more years of history than the rest of the Bible put together. It's from some 4,000 years BC, could be a little bit more than that, all the way to around 1800 BC. That's some 2,200 years that covers in the book of Genesis. It was written, is believed, it was written between around 1450 and 1400 BC. So it was also believed that it was written to the Jews at the time of the Exodus as history of the Jewish people, to encourage those. So that's what the beliefs are, to kind of give you a little bit of a background there of the book of Genesis. It's a good study there. Now, Genesis begins from chapters 1 through 11. It begins, of course, at creation. It continues on and moves on to the beginning of sin, and it moved on to the flood, and then the beginning of nations at the Tower of Babel, if you can remember back from our study there. And then it jumps into chapters 12 through 50, teaches us of the family of the Savior, beginning with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and then on to Joseph, and also the move to Egypt that Jacob and his family took there. So a lot is covered in the book of Genesis, and we'll be drawing our study in the book of Genesis to a close today. And Jacob is near the end of his life here in our lesson today, and it is time for him to pass blessings to his children. We're also going to find out that he does pass away. And also Joseph at the end of the lesson is also passes away as well. So let's get into our lessons. We have three lessons. Jacob blesses his children, and we're going to be looking at chapters 48 and 49. And then in chapter 50, at the end of chapter 49 and in chapter 50, we're going to learn of Jacob's death and his burial. And then we'll finalize our lesson today in chapter 50 with Joseph forgiving his brothers. So let's begin here in chapter 48, and the lesson focus is verses 3 through 5, but I want to let's just run through these verses today. I do it a little bit different than I've been doing it because it's so widespread. So let's do this. Chapter 48, we get here, chapter 48 covers a very special time of recollection on the part of Jacob, and a wonderful time of personal fellowship with his beloved son Joseph. In verse number 1 it says, "And it come to pass after these things that one told Joseph, Behold, thy father, which is Jacob, is sick. And he took him with his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And one told Jacob and said, Behold, thy son Joseph cometh unto thee. And Israel strengthened himself and sat upon the bed." So we understand that Jacob is near death. He is very sick. And Joseph and his two sons comes to visit him. When Jacob hears of this, he strengthens himself. He sits up in the bed and prepares for Joseph to come and see him. And Jacob, in verse number 3, said unto Joseph, God Almighty appeared unto me at Luz in the land of Canaan, and blessed me, and said unto me, Behold, I will make thee fruitful and multiply thee, and I will make of thee a multitude of people, and I will give this land to thy seed after thee for an everlasting possession. In verse number 5, and now thy sons Ephraim and Manasseh which were born unto thee in the land of Egypt before I came unto thee in Egypt, are mine. It's interesting there. As Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine. So what we find out here in verses 1 and 2 is, once again, Joseph hears of Jacob being near death, and Joseph takes his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, and comes to visit Jacob, possibly for the last time. He's very ill. We find out in verses 3 and 4 that Jacob here reminds Joseph, or tells Joseph, of the ladder dream, Ladder, the ladder dream, as we like to call it, that occurred when he was in the land of, or in Luz. He renamed Luz to Bethel, or Bethel, when he was on his way to Padan to get a wife there. He stopped there in Luz, and the Lord came and spoke to him there. And he renamed Luz to Bethel. So Jacob is talking about these times when God came and spoke with him and promised that this land would be an everlasting possession. So he's telling Joseph of this. He may have already spoken of Joseph, I'm sure he had, but he was reiterating that this land belongs to you and to our family by the promise of God. Now, this was found in chapter number 28, where Jacob had this dream. And what this dream did was it confirmed the Abrahamic covenant with Jacob and to Jacob. And so it's interesting there in verse number 5, Joseph brings his two sons, and a little bit of a study here. I'm wondering if I'm sure that Jacob had seen these children before, but you kind of may get the idea it might not have. He brought them to there, and Jacob is not see very well, and he asks who is with him, and then he finds out it's Manasseh and Ephraim. So, but Jacob says here in verse number 5 that that these two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, he said, are mine. And that's an interesting thing. What we're talking about here is adoption. Jacob here adopts Joseph's two sons, placing them right alongside their uncles in the order of blessings. So now you have all the sons of Jacob, and they're going to receive blessings from Jacob and inheritance from Jacob. But then you also have the two sons of Joseph, Manasseh and Ephraim, which are now going to be adopted by Jacob here. And in essence, what this is doing is granting Joseph's family a double blessing, if you will. So this is what is going on here between Joseph and Jacob and those two children. Now, in verses 6 through 22, it's not part of our focus today. We're not going to read these verses, but concerning the blessings of Manasseh and Ephraim, Jacob gives the youngest. This is an interesting little, I hope you have time to read this. Jacob doesn't see well. Doesn't hardly see at all because he's old. And so when it comes to give the blessings to Manasseh and Ephraim, Jacob takes his right hand, and I want to make sure I get this right. Jacob takes his right hand and puts it on the youngest, which is Manasseh. And when he does this, Joseph says, oh, no, Dad, you've got this wrong. You need to put your right hand on the oldest, which is Ephraim. And Jacob says, no, I don't. I know what I'm doing. And so believing that he's making mistakes, Joseph's trying to fix things up. And Jacob is saying, I'm not making a mistake here. You don't need to correct me. He has the right hand on Ephraim. He has the right hand, on Manasseh. But Jacob knew exactly what he was doing. If we read verses 17 through 19, I want to read these. If you want to turn there to 17 through 19. And when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand upon the head of Ephraim, see, it displeased him, and he held up his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head onto Manasseh's head. And Joseph said unto the father, not so, my father, for this is the firstborn. Put thy right hand upon his head. And his father refused and said, I know it, my son, I know it. He also shall be a people, become a people, and he also shall be great. But truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations here. So we find here that Jacob blesses the younger of the two, even though that's ordinarily not how it went, but Jacob did bless the younger. and made him higher. Now, we need to understand that both of these tribes, both of these families were going to be great people. It says there that Jacob says that both of them, he also will become a people, and he also shall be great. So even though he didn't get the true blessings from Jacob, he still is going to be a great people. And so we must have to understand this. Both of these sons of Joseph became to be great people here. So that's the interesting little tidbit there. Now we turn over to chapter number 49, and we see that what we see here in chapter 49 is the blessings of the children of Israel. So Jacob now has the time, and he's spoken with Joseph, and he spent some valuable time, some heartfelt time with Joseph, and he's blessed his children there. Now he calls the entire family in so that he can lay out the blessings for each child. We want to run through these very quickly here of all of the blessings that go toward each children. You have Reuben. Reuben was the oldest. Jacob says you would have great strength and you would have exaltation. However, you would not excel because of instability and moral failure. What did Reuben do? Reuben lay with Bilhah, Jacob's concubine, right? And so that Jacob did not agree with that at all, and we found that out. So this is why he says that he would be unstable and be a moral failure, because that he had lain with Bilhah. And we also see Simeon, and then we also see Levi, and he bundles these Simeon and Levi together on the blessings because I get the idea that Simeon and Levi were of the same mold, if you will. They had the same mindset. They worked together in a lot of things. And Simeon and Levi, because of their violent nature, their inheritance would be scattered among the land. Now, what did they do specifically that Jacob did not go along with at all? Well, we find that in chapter number 34 is when their sister Dinah got in Shechem, they came and they defiled their sister Dinah. They did not set too kindly to that, so they made that plan of having all the men circumcised there in Shechem. And so on the third day and the worst day, they went in and killed all the men, and then took all the women and children as slaves and took all of their spoil. And they came back, and Jacob was very upset about that. So Simeon and Levi here, because of their violent nature, that was probably not the only time. I'm sure it wasn't that they were violent. But their violent nature, their inheritance would be scattered among the land. Then we come to Judah, and Judah would be praised by his brethren and conquer his enemies like a lion. He spoke of him like a lion. And the Lion of Judah. And Judah would rule until the coming of Shiloh is spoken of there. And this Shiloh is speaking of the Messiah. So we know that Christ would come from the line of Judah here. So we move on to Zebulun. Zebulun would dwell near and be enriched by the sea. So there were a seaport there. Moved on to Dan. Dan means judge. He was to judge rightly, but he would end up being a dangerous serpent instead. Speaks of that. This was also the first tribe that is written here, first tribe of Jacob, that turned to idolatry. And you find that in Judges chapter 18, verse 30. We move on to Gad. Gad would be constantly attacked, but would overcome. So they would be a very persistent people. Here, Gad would. Where they would settle would be on the outer edge, and they would be constantly under attack, but they would always overcome. And then we come to Asher. Asher would dwell in the rich, fertile land of northern Israel. Naphtali. Coming next, Naphtali would be a free mountain people, dwelling in the mountains northwest of the Sea of Galilee, up in the mountains there. Then we come to Joseph. He speaks very highly of Joseph. Joseph is promised fruitfulness, victory in battle, strengthened from God, and blessings from heaven. And finally we come to Benjamin. Benjamin would be like a ravenous wolf. He would be the most warlike of the tribes. And we know that Ehud, that warrior, and Saul were both come from the tribe of Benjamin. So we see there the blessings that Jacob put upon the sons of Joseph, Manasseh and Ephraim. And then we also see that the blessings that were given or spoken, the last words of this great patriarch, Jacob, was to his sons, telling what they would be and who they would turn out to be. And we know that the sight of this old man, even though it was dimmed physically, spiritually, he was in tune with God, and God had expressed to him what all of his children would end up, and he could sit there and tell his children where they would end up and what they would be all about. Very interesting study there. Now it brings us to our second part today. We're going to look at chapter number 49, and we're going to look at verse 29 and 33. Now let's get there, 29. And we're going to find out that this is about Jacob's death and burial. And in verses 29, and let's read 29 through 33. And he charged them and said unto them, I am to be gathered unto my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephraim the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, in the land of Canaan, which Abraham, fix my light here, sorry. In the land of Canaan, which Abraham brought with the field of Ephraim the Hittite for possession of a burying place. Technical difficulties here. Apologize for that. There they buried Abraham and Sarah his wife, in verse 31. And there they buried Isaac and Rebekah his wife, and there buried Leah. The purchase of the field and of the cave that is therein was from the children of Heth. And when Jacob had made an end of commanding his sons, he gathered his feet into the bed, and yielded up the ghost, and was gathered unto his people. Now after he blesses his children, Jacob charges them once again, saying, look, I'm not going to be buried in Egypt. I don't want to be buried in Egypt. I have bought this land here, and this is where I want to be buried. And he charged them. He made them swear to him that they would bury him in the land of Canaan, not in the land of Egypt. And we find here in verse number 33 that Jacob does pass away. He dies at the young age of 147. 147. Now in chapter number 50, the first 3 verses here, not part of our focus, but we're going to read these. And Joseph fell upon his father's face and wept upon him and kissed him. And Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father. And the physicians embalmed Israel. And 40 days were fulfilled for him, for so are fulfilled the days of those which are embalmed. And the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. So we find here in verses 1 through 3 that Joseph commands the physicians to embalm Jacob. Now in verses 4 and 5, and when the days of his mourning were past, Joseph spake unto the house of Pharaoh, saying, If now I have found grace in your eyes, speak, I pray you, in the ears of Pharaoh, saying, My father made me swear, saying, Lo, I die, in my grave which I have digged for me in the land of Canaan, there shalt thou bury me. Now therefore let me go up, I pray thee, and bury my father, and I will come again. So, what do we find here? So, when the days of mourning were complete, what does Joseph do? He goes before Pharaoh, and he tells Pharaoh where he requests that Pharaoh allow him to go into the land of Canaan to bury his father. His father has requested that and has charged him with to bury him in a place that he's already purchased in the land of Canaan. And we find out that Pharaoh allows this. Now, he not only allows this, he foots the bill for it, if you will. We find this in verses 6 through 9. And Pharaoh said, Go up and bury thy father according as he made thee swear. And Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him, so who goes with Joseph? And with him went all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his house, and all the elders of the land of Egypt, and all the house of Joseph, and his brethren, and his father's house. They only left the little ones and their flocks and their herds, and they left in the land of Goshen. So this is a major caravan. This is a procession, if you will, of a burial procession that is going from Egypt into the land of Canaan. This massive amount of people with chariots and horses it talks about here. So it speaks of here, I think in verse number 9, that it was a very great company. Yeah, in verse number 9 it says both chariots and horsemen went up with him, and it was a very great company. And so great of a company that the people living in the land of Canaan took notice of this, and they were saying, this has to be someone of importance coming to be buried in the land of Canaan from the land of Egypt. So they took notice of those things. We find in verses 10 through 14, in verses 10 through 14, that Jacob is buried in the tomb of Abraham and Isaac, and it's a cave in the land of Mamre, which he had purchased, just like he said. And where Abraham and Isaac's bodies lay, they laid Jacob there as well as he requested. Now it's interesting here in verses 15 through 17, now that Jacob is gone, now the brothers start thinking. I want to read this. It's not part of our lesson, folks. Let's read this right quick. And when Joseph's brethren saw that their father was dead, they said, Joseph will peradventure hate us, and will certainly requite us all the evil which we did unto him. And they sent a messenger unto Joseph, saying, Thy father did command before he died, saying, So shall ye say unto Joseph, Forgive, I pray thee now, the trespass of thy brethren, and their sin, for they did unto thee evil. And now we pray thee, forgive the trespass of the servants of the God of thy father. And Joseph, listen to this, wept when they spake unto him. So this message comes to Joseph, and the brothers are worried about, what are they worried about? They're worried about now that father's gone, that Joseph is going to take vengeance and going to have them killed. That's what they're thinking. Now, Joseph is so far beyond that, that he just can't believe they're even saying this. And what I get the idea is that they just didn't get it. The brothers just didn't get what Joseph was all about. And Joseph wept when they spake. He could not believe that the brothers were still worried that he was going to take their life. He couldn't believe they still did not accepted that Joseph had truly forgiven them. In verse number 18, and his brethren also went and fell down before his face, and they said, Behold, we be thy servants. Now his brothers has come to him, and they're just laying prostrate at his feet, saying, Please, we'll be your servants. Don't kill us. This is basically what they're doing. And what does Joseph say in verse number 19? And Joseph said unto them, Fear not. And I love this. I love what he says. For am I in the place of God? Am I God? Am I God? Is what he's asking them. No, I'm not God. Verse number 20, But as for you, ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass, as it is this day, to save much people alive. Joseph got it. His brothers didn't. Possibly after this, they may have had a better understanding that Joseph truly had forgiven them and that they were going to be okay. And they were okay in the sight of Joseph. He says, now therefore fear ye not. There's this word nourish. I will nourish you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spake kindly unto them. What a blessing Joseph is here. What a blessing that is. Joseph forgives his brothers here in these verses. What a blessing. Joseph's brothers beg for mercy. Like I said, Joseph explains that he is not God and that whatever bad they did, God meant it for good. And then we finalize the book of Genesis with these final verses here. And I would like to read these to finalize the book of Genesis. And Joseph dwelt in Egypt, he and his father's house, and Joseph lived 110 years. And Joseph saw Ephraim's children of the third generation. The children also of Machir, the son of Manasseh, were brought up upon Joseph's knees. And Joseph said unto his brethren, I die, and God will surely visit you and bring you out of this land unto the land which he sware to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. And Joseph took an oath of the children of Israel, saying, God will surely visit you, and ye shall carry up my bones from hence. So Joseph died, being 110 years old, and they embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. That ends our study in this great book of Genesis. Next week, we will jump over to the book of Matthew. I'm looking forward to that study. And I hope you will continue on if you're listening to these lessons. And I hope you will continue on. I truly hope you have a blessed day. And may God truly protect you and bless you in many, many ways.